The Compromise of 1877, the Great Betrayal and the End of an Unfinished Revolution. The year 1877 marks the moment when the United States effectively abandoned the promise of equality that had been forged in the fire and blood of the Civil War. It was the year newly elected President Rutherford B. Hayes brought federal Reconstruction to an end, halting efforts to protect justice and equality for millions of newly freed Black Americans in the South. With that decision, the promise of Reconstruction faded, Black progress was dismantled, and a new era of racial oppression and terrorism began. The crisis began with the presidential campaign of 1876. On one side was New York Governor Samuel J. Tilden, a Democratic reformer who won the popular vote. On the other was Rutherford B. Hayes, a Republican and former Union general. Despite Tilden's lead, Hayes claimed victory in three crucial states: South Carolina, Florida, and Louisiana. At the time, Republican Reconstruction governments still controlled these states, so it was highly doubtful that a former Union general could carry them by any means other than political fraud. After the first count, Tilden won 184 electoral votes to Hayes's 165, with 20 electoral votes from 4 states reporting disputed results. Both political parties' electors claimed victory in Florida, Louisiana, and South Carolina. In Oregon, one elector was replaced after being declared illegal for being an elected or appointed official. So who should have been awarded these electoral votes is the source of the continued controversy. Congress created an electoral commission on January 29, 1877, to resolve the stalemate. It consisted of 15 members, 5 each from the House and Senate, plus 5 Supreme Court justices. 8 members were Republicans and 7 were Democrats. A group of Ohio Republicans and Southern Democrats met privately on February 26, 1877 at the Black-owned Wormley Hotel in Washington, D.C. They reached a fateful agreement that became known as the Compromise of 1877. The compromise was that Southern Democrats would acknowledge Hayes as president, but only on the understanding that Republicans would meet 5 demands. The 5 key points of the compromise were: the removal of all remaining military forces from the former Confederate states. At the time, U.S. troops remained in Louisiana, South Carolina, and Florida, but the compromise completed their withdrawal from the region. The appointment of at least one Southern Democrat to Hayes's cabinet. The construction of another transcontinental railroad through the South and Texas. Legislation to help industrialize the South and restore its economy following Reconstruction. The right to deal with Black America citizens in Southern states without Northern interference. Following this agreement, the Commission voted along party lines to award all 20 disputed electoral votes to Hayes, thus assuring his electoral victory by a margin of 185 to 184. If Hayes were allowed to assume the presidency, he would withdraw the remaining federal troops from the South, which would allow Southern Democrats to regain total political control of their region. After being sworn in, Hayes ordered the troops to stand down. The fallout from this compromise was immediate and tragic. During Reconstruction, Black Americans had begun to rebuild their families, own land, serve in government, and experience a measure of equality. But the Compromise of 1877 shattered those fragile gains. Southern Democrats quickly abandoned their promises of justice, and President Hayes withdrew his pledge to protect the rights of the freedmen. History would remember it as the Great Betrayal. The Compromise of 1877 did more than shift political power. Despite the constitutional promises of protections under the 13th and 14th Amendments, Black Americans in the South were returned into the hands of their former slave masters. This betrayal of 1877 extinguished the hope of social reform across the South. In its wake grew a century of resentment and repression. What followed was Jim Crow, a system of racial hierarchy, state-sanctioned violence, and domestic terrorism that would define Black life for generations, until the long fight for equal civil rights reignited nearly 100 years later.